back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host, John Harris, as always. And we are back to share our picks / bets. Once again, air quotation around bets, because, we're not real money. And as I always feel like I say, thank God it isn't, because, going into this week, last week was not a week to remember for a week. It was definitely one to forget. If I'm pretty sure I alluded to it last episode, but... and even the episode before that, it's getting to a point where I almost listen. If someone out there for some reason is especially listening to my picks, I wouldn't be upset. And maybe you should do this. Just do the inverse of what I say, because I've had a rough couple of weeks. John, obviously you didn't have the greatest week, but like I said, it was still solid. And like I said, money wise, you only lost 800. I lost 1,400, so I went I only had two. It was 2-11 because there were 13 games. 2-11 last week. You went 1, 2, 3, 4. You were 5-8, John. So still winning very much so in the money category. If anyone cares, overall wise, you were in the green going into last week. Unfortunately, last week put you back in the red, but only minus 440, so easily recoverable. While I got some work to do. I'm at minus 3,480. So, it's a good thing I don't actually bet on this IRL, because I would definitely be losing. And then just in terms of actual record wise against the spread, John, just under 500, 51 and 55 for the year. And I am, last week was terrible. I didn't even factor in that 11. I'm 41 and 65. So, doing much worse. But hey, maybe I can turn around. We are approaching the halfway point of the year, so there's still, like I always say, plenty of time, but time is starting to run out for me to make a comeback. Unfortunately, I keep digging a deeper hole, not intentionally, obviously, but it's just the hole gets a little bit deeper for me each week. So let's see if I can dig myself out, or if John will just continue to, amass this big lead and just dominate this year in terms of picks and bets. So let's start, as always, with the Thursday night game. We actually got a solid one. I mean, last week was solid result-wise, but in terms of talent, this one probably one of the better ones since opening night, and it is the Buffalo Bills at home at Buffalo. They are favored by 8.5 points, hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield in the gang. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
Well, this game's interesting to me because Buffalo's in a weird spot where they had that stretch of games where they were looking dominant, and now the last handful of games, not handful, the last couple games, they have not. And so I'm a little worried about their offense, and their defense has also not been the greatest. I don't know, there's just been inconsistency on both sides of the ball that has me questioning if they can cover an 8.5. It feels a little large with the way that we've seen them play. That said, the same thing happened to them to start the season where they looked questionable, and then they had that game against Miami where they totally blew them out. So Buffalo's definitely liable to bounce back at some point, I think, but I'm not going to take them in this game. Short week. Tampa's got some talent, although Tampa's been largely inefficient running the ball. Since all the injuries have kind of occurred on the defensive side for Buffalo, they're allowing an abysmal yards per carry to running backs. The run defense is looking like the absolute worst in the league the last few games. So I think even though Rachaad White and that offensive line have not been able to get a lot done, something might open up here, and if it does, we're going to see Chris Godwin and Mike Evans continue to have success because they've been having some solid years so far. So I don't know. I just have concerns about Buffalo on both sides, and I don't know if they can both show up at the same time. As we've talked about in the Patriots game, the defense doesn't show up. In the Giants game, the offense doesn't show up. And if that happens again against Tampa on either side, if the offense doesn't show up, then it's going to be a low-scoring affair. And if the defense doesn't show up, then I don't know. I think Tampa certainly has the weapons to keep up in a potential shootout. So the 8.5 just feels big. I'm rambling at this point. I'm putting 50 on Tampa Bay.
No, you hit all the points that I was basically thinking of, and that's why I'm also going Tampa for 100 because, just it's too many points, especially on a short week. And like you mentioned, Bills defense got a lot of issues. It has to have injuries, but they have issues. And like we mentioned with the Bills offense, rather simplistic. We all know it's going to be a lot of digs. So And Tampa's got a really good defense too, especially a good front seven that I think will be able to contain Allen, kind of like we saw the Patriots do last week. And they have a good enough secondary. And Todd Bowles is, I believe, a smart enough defensive mind where he's just, like I said, going to follow what New England did. Let's double Diggs and make these other guys beat us. And especially losing Dawson Knox. Yes, maybe they feature Dalton Kincaid more, but even then, he's still a rookie. And they have, once again, they have the linebackers to do it. And Devin White and Levante David. And, they have really good safeties. So, yeah, 8. I'm with you, basically. John and I both believe 8.5. Too much for Buffalo. And I don't think either of us would be shocked if Tampa Bay pulls off the upset either. But nonetheless, we're both taking the points and Tampa. John going with the Bucks for 50. I'm going with 100 on Tampa Bay. So a little more confident for me. But nonetheless, let's move to the Sunday games, starting with a game in your division between two rivals. And that is the Philadelphia Eagles, fresh off that big Sunday night win. They are favored by 6.5 points, going to Washington to play the Commanders. Did play earlier this year. That was that shootout that kind of went to overtime. So what are your thoughts here, John, and for how much?
Well, I know that the last game was close, but I just kind of have a feeling that it's tough to have like the same result happen twice, right? It's tough to win twice in division. But I do think there's a pretty large talent gap between the two teams. And if there's anything in terms of like a flip-flop of the results, I would say I lean a lot more likely towards Philadelphia just coming out really strong and figuring it out and not allowing this game to be close than I do the flip-flop of Washington takes the win. So I'm going with Philadelphia. I'm going to put a standard 100 here. Yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, it's just, like I said, last game was close. If I'm picking either of these teams to adjust, learn based off of what happened last time, and figure it out, I'm taking the Eagles. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So Philadelphia for 100.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I'm going with Philadelphia, putting 150, so a little bit more, again, on my end. Yeah, I mean, just to add on what you said, Philly also been trending in a better direction, like in terms of what we've seen on the field. A little more to the pass game we saw on Sunday night, just a little bit. As you mentioned, they're definitely the more talented team here, and we saw that I think in the last meeting where Philadelphia kind of started slow, but then once they adjusted, as we saw, they came back and were on fire. While on the opposite side too, Washington seems to be trending on the opposite way, where at least then their offense was clicking and putting up points. In the last 2 weeks, they've been struggling. Sam Howell's still getting sacked at a high rate. And then all their defense has been better the past few weeks. Like they played the Giants, which we know that offense is one of the lesser offenses, so kind of off the hook there. And then Atlanta, which I mean, once again, we talked a lot about Atlanta, and we'll talk about them later. But once again, that's also a limited offense too. So kind of played out to them, and then they also played Chicago too, week 5. So yeah, definitely a different level here. And yeah, so, sorry, Jonathan Allen. It's going to be another frustrating week, and you're going to have to probably take another L, buddy. I'm sorry. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll probably how upset he'll be if they do lose again, especially at home. But yeah, Philly's just awesome. It's just especially talent wise. That's it. So we're both going with the Eagles. John going with them for 100. I'm going with the Eagles for 150. So let's move over to Pittsburgh, where the Jacksonville Jaguars are visiting. They are the favorites, favored by 2.5 points, visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers. These pesky Steelers, John. Basically, do you believe in the Steelers to pull another rabbit out of their hat, or do you think Jacksonville takes care of business?
Man, I'm worried about what I'm about to say, but I'm picking the Jaguars. I'm going against the Steelers. I'm only going to put the standard 100, but although I'm worried about Pittsburgh, I have faith in Jacksonville. They're 5-2 against the spread on the year, including 3 straight. The 2 that they did not cover was weeks 2 and 3. And so, or actually, sorry, weeks 2 and 4, I think it was. So yeah, they started 2-2, and then they've won the last 3 in terms of against the spread. So, and even those ones where they did not cover, that was when their offense was completely struggling. They've started to figure it out. Their ETN's kind of this focal point. Everybody else is sort of falling into place outside of basically Calvin Ridley. He hasn't really popped that much. He's had moments, but Hasn't really been the true number one that people kind of expected him to be. But other than that, I mean, like the offense is looking good. And yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a gut feeling. I like what Jacksonville's been able to put on paper recently. And I don't know, man. I the only reason I'm only going 100 here is because I am worried that Pittsburgh's going to do it again, because they did it to me last week where I put 300. I'm not making that same mistake, where I put 300 on the Rams against them, and I was wrong. I'm not making that same mistake, and I'm pretty sure when they played the Ravens, I went big in that game too. I could be wrong, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I put 300 in that game as well on Baltimore. So I've had a stretch of games where I've picked against Pittsburgh, and I was putting big numbers, and I was wrong. And the ones where I've picked against Pittsburgh and I put small numbers, like when I picked Houston, I was right. So I'm going to go a little smaller this time and take Jacksonville and hope that it pays off for me.
Yeah. This, like, I am with you. Jacksonville is obviously the better team. And honestly, I expect them to win, but it being at Pittsburgh and, like I said, just, like you've alluded to, just Pittsburgh just finds a way. Just like they lose, like if you're grading like in terms of all all the plays, just from whenever I watch and up to this point, just feels like majority of the plays Pittsburgh are losing. Like in regards to like who won that specific play, but Pittsburgh just finds a way in crucial moments, situational moments, to make a play, the play that they need to do, especially on defense, and then on their offense, like I mentioned last week, and even in other weeks, they just turn it on at the right time. It seems like so. Honestly, this is kind of just throwing a dart on the dartboard. I'm going with Pittsburgh, at home. I like kind of what I saw that Deontay Johnson came back, was able to produce, and the offense has gotten a little bit better. I'm only going 25. I'm only putting 25 on the Steelers to cover the spread. I wouldn't be shocked if they just muck this game up, still lose, but somehow keep it within 2. So kind of threading the needle there, but this is one where I'm not entirely confident either way. So I'm going with the home team and the Steelers to make a play, because it was a concern of ours coming in, was pass protection in regards to the Jacksonville, especially the tackle position. So we'll see if that gets tested. It may not though, if they get ETN and that offense going like you mentioned, because even though they've been struggling without it's kind of been up and down. Everyone else, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, and obviously ETN, have been playing really well and producing. So we'll see what happens in our first disagreements and if Pittsburgh can do it again, basically, because they've been, like I said, they've been a tough team to pick and predict this entire year. So we'll see what happens there. Let's go over to an AFC East divisional matchup, and is between the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins back at home. They are favored by 9.5 points, hosting the New England Patriots. They also played earlier this year, so another divisional rematch already. So who do you have between these two, and for how much, John?
Short and sweet. I'm taking the Patriots. 9.5 feels big. I know they're coming off a loss, so maybe there's a revenge factor, and they are playing at home. But the last time they played was one of the lower scoring games for Miami, where it was a 24-17 game. They wouldn't have covered in that one. Once again, that was in New England. But New England's coming off a big victory against Buffalo. They've shown that, like, against certain defenses, they can kind of figure it out. And quite frankly, Miami's defense has been dealing with injuries. I don't know the status of Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey, but even regardless, coming back off the injury, I don't know. It just feels like I don't have a ton of confidence in Miami to cover that spread. I do think they win. But I'm thinking it's more of a touchdown game as opposed to a 2-score game. So yeah, I'm gonna take New England. That said, I'm still scared of New England. I don't really have a lot of confidence in their offense, and it feels like they're a ticking time bomb every time they touch the field. So I'm only gonna put 10.
Yeah, I'm actually also going New England. So oddly enough, we're both taking the Patriots here, but with the spread. That's very important, because I'm only going 25, yeah. So I understand. You went with the minimum. I thought about 10 too. I went with 25, but I'm going with 25 on the Patriots just because you mentioned many all those points, and Tyreek Hill, who knows his status. Once again, recording this on Wednesday, he did not practice. Didn't help that Mike McDaniel mentioned they may be out. His wording made it seem like he may miss some time, and not so. Who knows? Even regardless, a banged up Tyreek Hill, that's going to be tough. And also Jalen Waddle dealing with injury. Even Mostert too didn't practice on Wednesday. So maybe a Miami offense that's missing some of its key pieces. And not that I doubt that they'll be able to pull out the victory, but like you've mentioned, I think New England will at least keep it close. And also Miami defense, like you said, too, has some injuries and just hasn't been the best. And, New England, maybe they build off last week. I'm not saying to be as efficient game from Mac Jones, but I think they showed last week that they can find ways to move the ball. But like you said, it's still iffy. New England's so volatile in regards to what you're going to get. And obviously with the injuries in Miami, this is a tough one overall. So John and I both going with relatively small bets. John going with the minimum 10 on the Patriots. I'm putting 25. So that shows our confidence level in that game. So maybe if you're one of those people betting, maybe you avoid that one. But once again, I mean, don't listen to me. I've done poorly. So, all right, let's move over to an NFC North divisional matchup, aka my game. It is the Minnesota Vikings coming off that big Monday night win, favored by only half a point. So Vegas is not buying into, just bidding it's a flash in the pan ish. But they're going to Green Bay. My Packers are the underdog. Who are you going with here, John, and for how much?
Another short, simple one. I'll take Minnesota, but I'm only going to put 50. I just don't know, man. I really don't know. The only reason I'm not going 10 here is because Minnesota just beat San Francisco, so maybe there's a lot of confidence in the building right now. You're sitting at 3-4. It feels like if you can get to 500 here with Justin Jefferson on the horizon, you could maybe save your season. And so there's hope, and that's why I'm putting 50, but I still have no confidence in either team. So yeah.
And rightly so, especially as a Packer fan. I'm also going to Minnesota for 50. I think especially with some of the injuries on defense versus at this point, I guess what the Packers should hang their hat on more. I mean, no Devontae Campbell potentially still. Darnell Savage just went on IR, and not that he was amazing safety, but he was our starting safety. So even then, that's trickle down effect. Christian Watson and Jordan Love just don't seem to be on the same page, and I've already mentioned Love. His inaccuracy has been an issue in regards to stalling drives or just crucial turnovers at crucial points. So yeah, I'm going with the Vikings just because trust that offense a little bit more. We saw last week that even though they've lost Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison can still kind of not exactly fill the role, but sustain it to a degree, and obviously involve a little more TJ Hawkinson and such. So and also, I don't know if I mentioned last episode, but like what Brian Flores is doing with, at least with the talent he has, we know that team's not very talented on defense, but doing some creative things, forcing the issue, and kind of outperforming their talent, I guess is a better phrase. So yeah, I'm going with the Vikings with John. We're both going with them for 50. This isn't even really a jinx at this point for me. It's just not a lot of confident. That gives me confidence as a Packer fan going into this one. So we'll see, though. It is a divisional game, so but yeah, with the half point, basically we're picking Minnesota to win. So we'll see what happens there. But let's go over to New York, where is the rare battle between the two New York teams, Jets and the Giants. Jets are the favored by 2.5. Once again, quote unquote, at New York Giants. But nonetheless, really just a home game for both these teams. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
Another game, I have no confidence in either team, but I'm taking the Jets. If there's one thing I think I believe in, it's more so I like the Jets defense, obviously. The Giants defense has been looking good the last 2 weeks, so I don't want to act like they haven't been playing well. But I like what the Jets defense has done on the whole year, and they've shown up in a lot of big moments, and I think that they're going to control the line of scrimmage. And Tyrod Taylor, I think he's maybe still going to go. I don't know what the status is on Daniel Jones. I don't really know if it matters that much because, quite frankly, if you look statistically, Tyrod has actually been playing better than Daniel Jones on the year. So, yeah. But the one thing that I think really separates the two teams for me is I think we're going to see some game-changing plays out of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, to where on the Giants side, Saquon, I think, is going to have an impact, but I think it's going to be maybe somewhat limited considering that Jets defensive line. And then I don't think they're going to have enough time in the pocket to get some of those big plays they were able to get last week with Hyatt, with Darren Waller. And I also just don't know if, that secondary that the Jets have is going to give those plays up. So, yeah, I'm taking the Jets. But like I said, not a lot of faith in either team because their offensive performances have not been super great. So this could be like a 17-14 kind of game. And the Jets cover in that case. But the margin of error feels really freaking small. So I'm only going to put 50 on the Jets.
Yeah, I'm also going 50 on the Jets. One of the main reasons that I want to add on is Jets coming off a bye week, so I'm assuming that they spent extra time working, just building upon the offense. They've had the offensive success that they've had in the weeks prior. Because, like you mentioned, we know the defenses are good. It's just going to come down to which offense can move and it's simple, but which offense can have more success. And then, like you've already alluded to, I think there's a little more talent on the Jets offense that we've seen. And just more continuity, especially in regards to the pass game. And then recently they've been setting up the play action pass game with their success in the run game, and even finding ways to get Breece Hall the ball. Whether it's drilling Zach Wilson to take his check down, like we saw, like I said a couple weeks ago, he's more willing to do that. So, yeah, I am going with the Jets in this Battle of New York, but I'm with you. I expect this to be not a very exciting game to watch, unless obviously you're in the New York area. Then I'm sure they'll love it. I doubt you'll know this, but I'm interested. I guess the Jets would have to be in the visitors' locker room, right? Because I wonder if that would be weird for them, since what I mean. They're usually in the other locker room, since they're This is also quote unquote.
I'm
their
pretty
home.
sure I like talked to somebody about this like recently, and they were like, whenever. Like teams like this, whenever it happens, whoever's technically the home team, they get all the benefits, I guess, of being the home team, where the other team doesn't. But how much does that change things? I don't really think it changes a lot.
Yeah, I don't think in fact it's just one of those funny things where I just wonder if it's weird. But so all right, we're both going though with the Jets, even though they may be on the visitors' locker room. Going with the Jets for 50, both of us, over the New York Giants, and to cover that 2.5 points.
Just randomly. I wonder in that situation, because obviously it's both their home stadium. If there's ever been a situation where, whoever's the away team, after the game, maybe they're friends with the other guys, they go to the home locker room and, just seeing, who has your locker. Who? Yeah, that one's mine. If I'm a superstar, I'm kind of hoping maybe another superstar on their team has got it, and not the third string quarterback or something. I don't know, random small thing. I'm just kind of thinking about.
I wonder if there's ever beef. Be hey man, you find your locker mate, dude, you always leave a mess.
It's disgusting.
What's wrong with you? And now you get to finally confront your locker mate. That's in person. But I don't know. We'll see what happens between the both of them. But let's go to your game, John. Your Dallas Cowboys at home, off the bye week. They are favored by 6.5 points, hosting the LA Rams and Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford in the gang. So who do you have here, and for how much?
I'm taking Dallas. I'm going to put 150 on them. They're coming off the bye, and I feel like if there's any time that Mike McCarthy would actually look good, I'm hoping it would be when he's had time to prepare for the Rams. And he's seen the Rams play against some of the division rivals too, specifically Philadelphia. And so you can kind of measure up a little bit because you're very familiar with Philly, and you can see what LA did to try and beat him. You're okay, I don't know. It just feels like that maybe you have a little bit better of a picture of them. Also, they played a handful of times the last handful of years, and the games have been competitive, but that was when the Rams were good. Well, I don't want to say good. They were a contender, and now they're a solid team, but not that anymore. And so I think that Dallas is going to come out. I think they're going to look good. I think they're going to be able to execute on all sides of the ball. And I'm expecting a big CD Lamb game as well, because I know that he's been frustrated, and they mixed him in against the Chargers, and I think they're going to try and continue that this week. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just a dumb Cowboys fan, but I believe in my team this week at least.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and it's going to be our second disagreement. I'm going with the LA Rams, but mainly just to cover. I think I am with you. I think Dallas does win this one at the end of the day. have more talent, and you mentioned, and I expect the offense to have a few more wrinkles, but that's also why I'm taking the Rams, because I just like I'm not too entirely confident that they're gonna blow out the Rams, and the Rams defense too has been quietly solid. Hasn't been amazing, obviously, as you mentioned in previous years when they had all those studs, but they've quietly kind of made it a little bit better, especially in regards in comparison to last year. And I think Raheem Morris will have some answers to slow down the Dallas offense, especially once those surprises are kind of out of the way and Dallas goes back to their bread and butter. But on the flip side, always scary, with your defense, because we know that if it's, especially with the Rams not having Kyron Williams, he was, I know the run game was solid last week, but I feel like Dallas will be able to slow it down this week. And obviously, will just come down to Matthew Stafford dropping back and throwing the ball. And I just think that we saw Pittsburgh find ways to slow that down. Obviously, like you mentioned, I think Mike McCarthy would definitely be looking at that tape and seeing what they did. Probably bracket Cooper Kupp, make life tough for Puka Nacua to get open, and then what? You're not scared of Tyler Higbee beating you. Sorry, Tyler Higbee, but that's just kind of the sad truth. I think the Rams keep it close though. Threading the needle. John going with his Cowboys for 150. I'm going with the Rams for 50. So we'll see what happens between that one, but that should be a good game nonetheless. Let's go over to what I don't think. It could be a good game. Vegas thinks so it will be, but I don't think there will be as many eyeballs on these two teams. And it is the Indianapolis Colts. They are at home, favored by 0.5 point, going up against the New Orleans Saints. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going to take the Saints. It's in large part just due to the fact that I think their defense matches up well against Indianapolis, and so I think they can slow them down somewhat. And I don't think that can happen on the other side of the ball. The Saints offensively have not looked great, but the Colts defensively they've been very bad. So I think that Derek Carr can have a solid outing here. Kamara's been looking good. I mean, he's been getting a ton of work in the few weeks he's been back. I don't expect that to change here. And I don't know. I just think that, like I said, that Saints defensive matchup against Indianapolis is the part that kind of has me sold on Indy here, on New Orleans here. So gonna take the Saints, and I'm gonna put the standard 100.
I'm going the opposite way. I'm going with the Colts. I really like what I've seen from Shane Steichen, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Have a lot of creative just plays and always have a good plan of attack for every game, and they're able to move the ball. I know there's the one Jacksonville game, but that was more, I put that more on Gardner Minshew just throwing, have some poor turnovers. We saw last week, he cleaned it up, gave them a chance. It's just, the Cleveland Browns defense forced, 3 fumbles and blocked a field goal. That's, it was just an amazing performance for them. They let up a lot of points, and I just don't think that the Saints defense will cause as much havoc that the Browns did. And then on the flip side, I'm still concerned about Derek Carr in this offense. Just, it's been lacking, and then especially with the Chris Olave situation, which I'm assuming, I'm guessing he'll be able to play, but nonetheless, just all that stuff. And you're going to be on the road. It's just, I think it's going to play a factor for the Saints. And basically since a 0.5 point, it's basically a pick 'em for us. So I am going with the Colts only for 25 though, just because it is scary between these two teams in regards to what we're going to get. Because the Saints could just, maybe this is what gets them clicking. I don't know, but John going with New Orleans for the standard 100. I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts for 25. And like I said, basically that one's a pick 'em, at least at this moment on Wednesday. Who knows if the line moves or not. But let's go over to Carolina, where it's going to be the meeting of the top 2 quarterbacks taken in this draft class, as the Houston Texans, though, are favored by 3.5 points going to Carolina. Both teams coming off a bye week, so both teams have had extra time to prepare, so pretty even in terms of that. But who do you have in regards to the matchup, and for how much?
I'm going to go Houston here. I don't know. Carolina's just, I don't know what analysis to really give here about Carolina. They're just not that good. Like, that's just kind of how it is. And Houston has shown some good stuff on both sides. So I just think they're kind of the better team. I'm going to put 200 on them. I feel confident. It is in Carolina, so that part's there. Also, I think Carolina was on bye last week.
That's what I said. Yeah, both teams were on bye.
Both teams were.
Because Houston was on bye.
Yeah. So I guess there's not really an advantage in that case. They've had time to prepare for each other. I don't know what Houston's next game is like the week after. So maybe there's a look ahead game. I don't think Carolina's in a position to really look ahead at all. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of grasping at straws for reasons to believe in Carolina. And just quite frankly, I think Houston's a lot better, which is kind of crazy to say because over the last handful of years has not been the case.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm going with Houston for 100 because, yeah, like we mentioned, Carolina offensive line has been a major issue. And this Houston front four has been a good, pleasant surprise. Will Anderson and I always forget the other guy. I think it's Greenard. They're the young defensive end. He's been playing really well. And we've been singing C.J. Stroud's praises in that offense, and they could be just another week of them getting healthier, especially on the line. I think will help. And Carolina potentially in fire. So if our Amari seeing Jeremy Chin trade block rumors and such, I want to be so. I'm going with Houston as well. Just right now, the more polished, more talented team. And sorry Carolina, but who knows? Maybe they'll shock us. But both John and I going with Houston. John a little more confident going with Houston for 200. I'm going with the Houston Texans for 100. So we both believe that they will cover that 3.5 point spread over the Cardinals. But let's get to the last game of the early slate, and last and probably least, it is the Atlanta Falcons, favored by 2.5 points, going to Tennessee to play the Titans. In regards to injury notes, once again, this is Wednesday, so this all could be clarified later. Looking like Tannehill may not play this game. He did not practice yet, so I think they said it's maybe actually a combination of Will Levis and Malik Willis. So I don't know what that means exactly. If they're, this old phrase, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. I don't know. But nonetheless, not the most sexiest matchup. Who do you have here between these two?
I'm taking Atlanta. I'm not messing with the two quarterbacks. I'm not going to do it. We have no clue what we're going to get out of Will Levis. We've seen Malik Willis before. It wasn't great. Atlanta's defense has been pretty solid this year, and Kevin Byard's gone. Like, I imagine the feeling around the locker room is some of the guys that are going to potentially, be here today are going to be gone tomorrow. And we're, Derrick Henry to the Ravens, rumors are swirling. Who knows about Tannehill's future with the organization? There's talks about a lot of different people. So I'm just not messing with it. I'm taking Atlanta. Apparently, Bijan Robinson is healthy. So maybe he'll play in this game regardless. It honestly didn't really matter who the other team was. I'm not going to mess with the Will Levis, Malik Willis combo when there's too much unknown there. That's like a college thing to play two quarterbacks, not an NFL thing.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I'm going with the Falcons. Yeah, you mentioned that defense is really good. And yeah, we know the Tennessee offense has just been a mess, pretty much. And you mentioned defense, especially losing one of their core guys. It's easy to say Byard, Jeffrey Simmons. Those are probably their top two players on defense. Then maybe Harold Landry, but obviously they let him go in regards to Byard. So yeah, I think Atlanta will find success. Probably be a little bit tough in regards to the run game, but yeah, at the end of the day, I'm sure you can too. We could easily see whichever quarterback is behind center have a few crucial mistakes that just lead to easy Atlanta turnovers, and Tennessee's just not built to, try to throw their way back into the game. So we both got the Falcons. John going with them for 80. I'm going with the Falcons for 200. I'm once again, I'm playing from behind here. I'm trying to bank into the fact that there's the lack of quarterback production there, or lack of offense at Tennessee. So we both believe in the Falcons to cover that 2.5 point spread. And that's all for the early, noon Central Standard Time games. Now we go to the afternoon games. Starting on the West Coast, going to Seattle, where the Seahawks are favored by 3.5 points, hosting the Cleveland Browns. I believe they've already ruled out Deshaun Watson, I believe. So it looks like it's going to be PJ Walker again. Once again, this is Wednesday, so who knows if that changes all. And Drum Ford, doubtful. But who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks here. The Browns have already announced Watson's not playing. We're going back to BJ Walker, which is fine. Like, I think he's been solid. But I like Seattle. I think they're due for not necessarily a bounce back, but just like a solid performance. What they put on tape against Cincinnati wasn't great. Who did they play last week? Was it Arizona? And I mean, they won that one pretty handily, so maybe there's a little bit of momentum there, but also people don't really have the highest expectations of Arizona. It's where Cleveland, although Watson's not playing, I mean, they beat San Francisco without him. So people, there's just a little bit more on the line in this one, and I think that maybe Seattle's going to come out and take advantage of it. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks. I'm going to put the standard 100. No Jerome Ford, no Watson. Maybe there's some offensive struggles for Cleveland, and Seattle's able to come out on top.
I'm going the opposite way. I'm going with Cleveland because I'm actually concerned about Seattle's offensive line. And still looking like it's going to be no Abraham Lucas, their right tackle. And we've seen that Myles Garrett's on a tear, and I wouldn't be shocked if this is another game where he kind of wrecks, or some of the other cast on that defense as well. And, I'm not, let me double check. Don't think there's an update on DK Metcalf. Maybe he's off the injury report, but I'm trying to see.
I believe he is looking like he's going to play. I don't know if he's off of it yet, but yeah, signs are pointing towards that.
Okay. So yeah, but regardless, we know that Cleveland's defense is really good, and Seattle still a little bit simplistic on offense in terms schematically. And then on the flip side, although it is PJ Walker, like you mentioned, he's still find ways to be able to manage games, and especially since Seattle losing Uchenna Nwosu, who is arguably one of their, probably I would say their best, but at worst one of their better pass rushers and linebackers for them. I feel like that would be a tough loss. And just at the end of the day, I think Cleveland's just going to find ways to move the ball and, like I said, let their defense make some plays and win the game. So I'm going with the Browns to. I won't be shocked if they do lose by 3, but I think that they actually outright win this game. But I'm going with the Browns for 50. John is going with the Seattle Seahawks to cover that 3.5 for 100. So potential swing there. Another disagreement between the both of us. So let's go over to an AFC West showdown. These two teams actually played literally 2 weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago. And it is the Kansas City Chiefs. They are favored by 7.5. This game is in Denver, so they're going to the Broncos. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
Taking Denver, I'm putting 10 on it. I don't have a feel for this game. The last time they played, it was close, and it was in Kansas City. We're going to Denver now. Neither offense were able to do much, and at least, I don't know. I just don't know, man. I don't know. Kansas City's offense hasn't been great outside of Kelsey. And Kelsey had a really good game against Denver, and yet they still couldn't score a ton of points. Denver wasn't able to do much. I think they improve on that, but Kansas City's defense has been really good. I don't know. The 7.5 is the part that scares me. If it was 6.5, I might go KC, but that potential touchdown and they don't cover is the part that worries me. So I'm going Denver, but like I said, basically no faith. So I'm putting 10.
No, I hear it. This is a tough one. I'm going with Kansas City, but I'm only going 50 because, like you mentioned, like this Kansas City offense has been good enough to win games. It hasn't been obviously at the level that it has been in previous years. Still figuring out how to get that wide receiver room going. Like you mentioned, it's really just Kelsey, and then maybe in some games getting Isaiah Pacheco going in the run game. Which once again, I will give kudos to Andy Reid for. It's something that that kind of has always been an issue in previous years, but once again, maybe because of the situation, they're more willing to be patient with the run game. But yeah, that's the reason I'm going with the Chiefs, is at least they have those two things to lean on. We've seen this Denver defense be lesser than at times, and last time too, they played a short week Thursday night. If I remember correctly too, I think Kelsey was had dealt with an injury that previous Sunday, so he did play, but he wasn't potentially 100%. Obviously, he's had more time and looked better since then. And on the flip side, I think Kansas City, they'll have probably a better feel for what Denver's going to do. Although it will be interesting because now that we mentioned last week, the running backs for Denver have been looking better. So it'll be interesting to see if Denver can get that run game going, or at least get something going off those two guys, and make life easy for Russell Wilson in that pass game. But nonetheless, I just trust the Chiefs more, so that's why I'm going with them. Once again, don't trust them a lot, as I'm only going with 50, as this should be an interesting matchup at Mile High between these two division rivals. So there's that. Let's move over to what should be the game of the afternoon. It is at San Francisco on the West Coast. The Niners are at home, obviously, favored by 3.5, hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals coming off the bye week. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to take the Niners. I feel like, so the spread was 5.5 prior to the Brock Purdy concussion news, and it's moved all the way down to 3.5. And I feel like, quite frankly, 2 points is kind of big because I don't think that Brock Purdy to Sam Darnold is going to be that much of a gap. And I don't think Sam Darnold's actually that good, but you have McCaffrey still. You have, Kittle, Ayuk, good offensive line. The defense has been balling. Cincinnati has been passing a lot because the run game has been bad. And Joe Burrow is, apparently still coming off the injury and it hasn't been great. Now, they are coming off the bye, so there's that. But regardless, I don't know. I feel like San Francisco is going to be a little bit upset about what happened in Minnesota, and they're going to go in front of their home crowd. They're faithful and figure it out. So I feel confident in San Francisco. So I'm putting 200 on it.
I think San Francisco wins this one, but I'm once again threading the needle. I think the Bengals actually at least cover. I'm guessing off the bye week that they will, like obviously Burrow will be a little bit healthier, and they'll kind of look at that Minnesota game and see, okay, what can we take away? Obviously, maybe attack the boundaries more, which we know that they don't mind doing that anyway with Jamar Chase. And then hopefully T. Higgins too is looking and performing better because he's, I think before the bye, he was obviously playing with that rib injury. So, yeah, I think even though they may be one-dimensional, I think they keep it close. And then even on the opposite side of the ball, Cincinnati's defense, for the most part of this year, has been their saving grace. They've been doing their job and just trying to keep them in these games, especially in the red zone, been really good in regards to, just allowing field goals, not 6 points. And I just fear that, although I am with you, I think Darnold will have some success. It won't be a complete fire for the 49ers offense. I wouldn't be shocked if there is a couple of struggles, a couple of miscues, just a couple of just things that San Francisco with Brock Purdy probably wouldn't. It would be much tighter ship and cleaner operation on offense. But it's a tough one to gauge. I think this will be a fun game to watch, especially towards the end. So I'm going with the Bengals only for 50, just because like you mentioned, it is scary that their offense is one-dimensional. So that could easily just play in the Niners' favor, and especially if the Niners get ahead, that'll be even tougher too. But so John's going with San Francisco for 200 to cover that 3.5-point spread. I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals to at least keep it close for 50. So, for just 50, not 450. I'm not doing that. Okay, let's go to the last afternoon game, and it is the Baltimore Ravens, favored by 8.5 points, going to the Arizona Cardinals. Who do you have here, and for how much?
I'm taking Baltimore. I'm gonna put 100 on it. The 8.5 feels a little bit big, but I don't know. Baltimore's a really good team. So the only reason I'm not going like huge here is I went pretty big last week on some of the games like this with San Francisco versus Minnesota. I can't remember who the other one was that I went huge on. It was it was the Rams against Pittsburgh, which that one wasn't some of this, but like Niners versus Minnesota, right? Feels like a huge mismatch, and then Minnesota comes out and balls. So I'm just a little bit worried that that might happen again, and maybe that's got me spooked. So I'm only going to go standard 100, but I do believe in Baltimore here.
Yeah, I believe in Baltimore too. I'm taking that risk that you just mentioned you're avoiding. I'm putting 300 on the Ravens. I just feel like right now, we saw last week their offense we saw the full form of their offense fully clicking, fully healthy too. And I just think Arizona, we're kind of had some early season magic, and I still like some of the things they're doing there, especially coaching staff wise. I think we're starting to see, though, kind of like Cinderella turn back into the carrot turning back into a pumpkin. That's what kind of is happening, is that I feel like in recent weeks, kind of going back to earth, the Cardinals, now that teams know to give them their proper respect, it's not just going to be pushed over. But the Ravens' defense has been amazing, and I think that they're going to give Josh Dobbs and the gang lots of issues, especially since the Cardinals haven't really been able to run the ball that effectively and have just continuity in their offensive drives recently. And then, like I said, with Baltimore, they're clicking on all cylinders. Their passing game's looking great. When we saw last week, Lamar just light up the Lions. And arguably, I think we can say the Lions are a more talented team, or defense at least, than the Cardinals. So yeah, I'm going with Baltimore as well. I'm going with the Ravens for 300. John going with the Ravens for 100 to cover that 8.5 point spread. So both really need, especially me, really need Baltimore to pull through there. So hopefully they do, for my sake. But let's get over to the Sunday night game. It is at LA. The Chargers, they are the favorites, favored by 8.5 points, hosting the Chicago Bears. And it's going to be another week of Bagent at quarterback. So, John, who do you have here and for how much?
This might surprise people because I've been pretty big on the Chargers train, but I'm taking Chicago and I'm going to put 100 on it. I don't know, man. The Chargers, there's just a lot of things that got me confused about them. The defense has not been great. The offensive line has been pitiful. They can't really run the ball. And who knows, maybe they bounce back on a lot of these things this week. But ultimately, yeah, I think with the Chargers, I kind of got to see it before I can believe in it again, because they haven't really looked like I expected them to look this year. And it's a little bit disappointing. So taking Chicago for 100.
All right. Well, another disagreement between us, because I'm going with the Chargers for 175. If there's a get right game, this is it. LA in prime time. You have the Bears with their backup quarterback, rookie undrafted. I know he had a great week last week, but we've mentioned that, outside of really DJ Moore, like, who's going to scare you at this point? And so I would assume Brandon Staley's focal point is going to be taking away DJ Moore and not letting that run game go off. All that is scary, because it's still been an issue for the Chargers. And we saw last week Deontay Foreman was able to, in the Bears run game, he was the main point, were kind of able to do whatever they wanted. So that could pose issues. But and then I just think the Chargers offense has to get going this week. And I assume that they will, like I said, especially with all the criticism. I'm sure they hear it, and I'm sure Brandon Staley is definitely feeling that hot seat. If he isn't, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'm going with the Chargers, kind of just a gut call, to cover that 8.5 points. And it is a lot, and it is scary, but I'm going with the Chargers for 175 to do so. John is going with the Chicago Bears to at least cover for 100. So we'll see. That's it. I think that's I want to say that's our largest swing. Yeah, I think it's our largest swing. So, that is. So we'll see if that helps either one of us, and if the Chargers can get back on track. That's obviously the bigger picture there. Because if not, especially if they lose this game in Chicago, that's definitely pitchforks, and all that against the Chargers will be out there. There'll be calls for Brandon Staley's head if there aren't already, but there'll be more. So let's move from Sunday night over to the Monday night game, and it is at Detroit at Ford Field, where the Lions are favored by 8.5 points, hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. I'll have to double check and see if it's gonna be Jimmy G, but nonetheless, John, who do you have here and for how much?
I'm going with Detroit. Although the spread is big, and they're coming off a tough loss against Baltimore. In the Baltimore game, the big point that I was making was Baltimore they can match up talent-wise, they have a good defense, and they have an elite quarterback. The Raiders don't really have any of that, and so I think Detroit's going to be back to business as usual, where they were just absolutely smacking some of these bad teams. And I think, Detroit's going to roll, so I'm going to put 200 on the Lions.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, and I mentioned last episode, for the Raiders, if it isn't Max Crosby making a play on defense, there's no one really else you can depend on. And we know this Detroit team, their mentality is they want to be physical, they want to run the ball, and I think that's just a bad recipe for the Raiders, because that means more tight ends and such. The Lions love to run multiple tight end sets, love to run the ball, just go downhill, and that's just not a strength of the Raiders, especially for Max Crosby to make any impact. And then on the flip side, who knows who we're gonna get at quarterback? Regardless, it hasn't been pretty. Either it's Jimmy G or it hasn't been great. Regardless, so it's another reason why I am, and I'm sure you are as well, extremely confident in the Detroit Lions. So we're both going with the Lions to cover that 8.5 points over the Las Vegas Raiders for 200. And those are the picks. did you still want to do the anytime touchdowns? Because
that was a 1 week thing.
all right, we'll keep that 1 week thing. So yeah, those are our picks against the spread. Like I said, all 32 teams are playing, so 16 games. So no buys this week at all. No international games though. That's I think the following week, so don't got to worry about any early game starts. But yeah, we got a full slate of games for week 8, so we'll see what happens here. But as always, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or throw in before we call it there?
That's gonna be it for me.
All right, so yeah, we'll see y'all on the flip side on week 9. Hopefully you enjoy your football. Basketball season starting up. We're not going to be doing basketball for a bit just because we're in the heat of the NFL season, and I like to at least wait a month or two because there's so many basketball games and just easier to get a picture and what to talk about, then. But yeah, your Celtics are playing as we're talking, and I finally get to see some Victor Wembanyama in real action.
I don't think I've ever seen the media more excited for a player's debut in my life. I mean, like LeBron obviously debuted when I was a kid, but even like I remember, Zion and all these kind of guys, like the amount of people that are like talking about this Victor Wembanyama debut is crazy, which rightfully so. Like the guys, I mean, everybody knows about him, and
he's an anomaly of a prospect.
There's a lot of excitement about just seeing him play, which is, I don't know. I think it's kind of fun for the league because I don't want to say the NBA was dying by any means, but there certainly hasn't been this level of excitement about a singular player in a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, it helps that he's, we see some of those highlights he's already done in preseason.
Yeah.
Like, where and someone's gonna not against scrubs, like blocking Klay Thompson shots and some crazy I can't wait to watch it, win or lose. So it'll be fun. But yeah, that'll do it for us. We'll see you all to react to week 8 next week. And like I said, we'll do basketball probably not until like maybe December or January. So if you're holding out for that, sorry, but not sorry. But as always, that'll do it for us. Adios.